and welcome to this week's podcast or YouTube, subject to where you're listening or watching us. I am joined today by Tony. Now, Tony was brought to my attention by my wonderful colleague, Simon. Simon spoke at the International Associations Conference a couple of weeks ago, where we've been lucky enough to talk for about the last 5 or 6 years. And Simon was running a session, running a stream all around marketing and content marketing. And he had a chat with Tony, who was talking at the conference, and it was all about content marketing. Now, for any of you that have listened to our podcast or training sessions or YouTube before, you know I'm really passionate about content marketing, but not just for the sake of it, because anyone can pump out content for the sake of it, but really focused on usable content and stuff that can actually, guess what, add value to your end users, whether they're business people or consumers. Now, APNIC have adapted a great approach to this, and this is why we've invited Tony onto our podcast and YouTube today, because I really wanted to bring to life this rather than just talking about the theory. We always love, and we know we get great feedback from you guys that you really love the actual real life situations. So thank you so much for joining me today, Tony. It's great to have you here from the other side of the world as such. You're in lovely Australia, as I'm in the cold UK.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Pleased to do this.
First of all, can you just give people a very quick synopsis of who APNIC is, please?
Sure. And I'm assuming many of you would not have heard of us. So basically, APNIC is one of 5 regional internet registries around the globe. We're a non-profit organization. We're member-driven. And to explain properly what we are, I'll give you a 60-second, I'll do the impossible and try and explain how the internet works in 60 seconds. So basically, the internet itself is not run by any one single organization, government, company. It's run by the cooperative effort of tens of thousands of network operators globally, whether they be telcos, internet service providers, universities, companies, governments. They all work together to bring us the internet. Now, to send information on the internet, you need to have every device needs to have an address, so it knows where it's pulling the information from and where it's sending it to. And to do that, everything needs to have an address, and those addresses are numbers. They're not words, not the domain names, but the actual numbers. You might see them sometimes as sort of 192.30. something. That's an IP address. So that's what we do. We provide IP addresses to those organizations and network operators, so they can then basically run their networks and connect things to connect up all of these devices around the world. And there's 5 of us globally, and we look after the Asia Pacific region, which starts as sort of, you're looking at a world map, sort of as far left as Afghanistan and as far right as some of the remote Pacific islands, and everywhere in between is what we do. And so, but on top of that, we also do a lot of development work in terms of going out and doing training in the region, training people how to build and run networks, and a whole bunch of other things as well, research, statistics about how the internet runs in our region. But primarily, we're a registry.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. So when you first joined APNIC, when was that, Tony?
It was in 2013, end of 2013. So it was a while ago now.
Okay. And when you joined, what was going on in the content marketing section as such within APNIC?
Yeah, so APNIC is, we have members, and being transparent and communicating with our members is sort of really important for a membership-driven organization. The communication tools we had in place at the time when I joined the organization weren't very effective. We had a number of newsletters, some very confused news and media release pages that weren't quite right. And the social media that we did have, that we were using, like our Twitter and Facebook accounts, etc., they had a good follower base, but the way they were used, it wasn't integrated, and just in general, look, it wasn't actually working that well. And effectively, when we had a look at it, we thought, look, there's too much going on here, and our members are confused as to where to get, what's the single source of truth? Where do I go to find information about APNIC? If I want to know what the latest thing is going on, the latest news, latest developments, where do I go? I've got all these different places and different things coming at me. And so we got rid of all of the newsletters, and we got rid of The media releases, we don't do media releases anymore. We haven't for years. And instead, what we did is we created a blog, a single place for all information to go. So it was very easy for our members to say, what's going on at APNIC? I'll check the blog. Obviously tightly integrated with our social, but I could talk about that later. So that's what we did. And it's look, it's been successful for us, very successful. The idea initially for that blog was to obviously streamline our communications, but at the same time as when we did this work, and me being a sort of, I'm an old school PR guy at heart and doing a lot of, press media relations type work in my, previous lives. And so when I joined APNIC, one of the first things I did was like, well, how are we going to communicate, get our, our news out there, and how are we going to talk about this stuff? And quickly realized there was not a single, there was hardly any journalists at all who followed what we did. As you mentioned, we're incredibly niche what we do, in a niche corner of the internet. And even technology journalists who may have followed us had no idea what we did. And so, or lacked the resources and understanding to cover us because they were too busy covering everything because their newsrooms had been gutted. And I don't need to tell the story about how media have basically, been shrunk, but that was the case for us as well. And so we need to tell our own story. And what it also meant was our members and our community of network operators out there, they didn't really have a place to get their news from either, to find out what was going on in their line of work. They might find some things on bulletin boards here and there or mailing lists, but really there was no central place for them to go either. So we saw this as an opportunity to meld the two together, to not only sort out some streamlining communication issues that we had, but to actually provide a platform for the community to find out what was going on within their community as well.
I think it's really fascinating, the journey you've been on, because when I'm talking to associations, and we do a lot of training for associations and large global organizations, it's always like, we've always done that. We've always sent an email once a month, or we've always sent a newsletter once a month, or we've got 20,000 followers on Twitter. We have to keep tweeting. And my view is very similar to yours. Like, okay, if it's not providing any tangible benefit, just stop doing it. Don't think you have to keep doing it. Just take that step back and go, okay, what is the gap in the market? How can we add value? How can we actually add value to these people, rather than just pushing our own sort of blowing your own trumpet stuff, or stuff that actually isn't going to be value? So it's quite a drastic decision. How did that go down within the organization, Tony?
It was funny, actually. It was actually well received, because at the time, APNIC does a lot of really good work. We're always out in the community, helping. We might have trainers who are in Bhutan one week helping teach people how to set up an IXP. And then internet exchange point. Sorry if I talk in acronyms.
That's okay.
It's a tech thing. Sorry. Or they might be, in Cambodia doing training. And so there's all this great stuff that we do out in the community, but it just wasn't getting out. The news wasn't getting out there. And, there were sort of, we at one stage we did have members sort of rumbling saying, well, what are you guys up to? Why are you traveling all around the world? What are you doing with your time? And this came as a bit of a, internally within APNIC, people were like, well, why would they ask that? Because we're doing all this great work. Why would that be questioned? And it just because the information wasn't getting out there. So there was a transparency issue as well at play here, because of the fact that the communication tools weren't being used that well. And so it was actually welcomed, that the switch, because we did show almost instantly much more of our news was getting out there. And staff themselves in the past were saying, oh, it's the news page, it's of the website. It's, very important. You're sort of put on a pedestal, for what I'm doing, the great things I'm doing. Well, it has to be really good to go on the news page. And so what you'd find is that good stories within the organization weren't getting out because people thought, oh, I know it's really good, but I don't think it's important enough to put on the news page. And it was a real shame. And this, what the blog allowed to do, it meant it was, I guess, more accessible to them. It didn't have to be a long piece. It didn't have to be a certain format. It could be short, it could be long. It could be about anything really, as long as it was value to the members. And we created, one of the things that we did internally once we created this was a lot of processes around making it fun to blog and not a scary thing. So when we created the blog, we did a lot of work, not only with the executives to make sure that they understood what we were trying to do, and how this was going to work, but the next layer down, which is the most important layer, which is the day-to-day managers who are saying, well, I don't want my teams wasting my time doing this stuff. But once they understood, and they didn't want to get in trouble for saying something wrong. And once we got them to understood what we needed to do, and how, we really didn't need everybody to be writing all day, just a post here and there from a few people adds up. And then we got that buy-in. And I think the other thing that was important for us is that APNIC is a registry. So for us, accuracy is super important, because that's what we do. We maintain a public registry that people check, and everything has to be correct. So that accuracy, I guess, characteristic flows through our entire organization. Making sure things are right is important. And so when we're asking people to put themselves out there and write a blog post and publish it, there's a bit of fear that I might get something wrong. And we did a lot of work into showing people that, what, things can be corrected if they're wrong. We have these great approvals processes to make sure it takes the burden off you. And look, if there is a mistake, we can just fix it. It's okay. It was okay. And that worked. And after we got a few people doing it, we've got some momentum, and then all of these stories are being shared. And and yes, it was absolutely welcomed. So showing those results straight away helped.
Yeah. And I think, again, you've touched on some really important points there that we often see when we're talking or upskilling organizations, from small organizations to global ones. There's the frightened of saying the wrong thing, frightened of, I haven't got time to do this. I'm not a marketeer, so I don't know how to write a blog, and getting that whole buy-in, because within marketing, people often think, or content, it has to sit in the marketing department. Well, it doesn't. It sits across all facets, because someone might speak to your customer service team, or they might speak to your tech team, but there's so much information there that's up in the heads of your people within your organization, but they are like, it's not my job, or I don't know how to write it. Or I've worked with organizations that I work with their marketing team, and the people with all the knowledge are scientists, and they're like, well, I can't write a blog because I'm not a scientist. Well, there's lots of ways there's lots of processes you can do to do that. So I share my tips in our training and how to do that. But I think the fact that you've said we get whole organization buy-in is the first thing that absolutely has to be nailed, because if you don't have whole company buy-in, then you're sort of struggling. You're trying to push water uphill, aren't you? Because you're never going to get anybody to contribute. And then actually getting them of how they can provide that value. So actually, why their knowledge is valuable. And around this could be wrong, it always fascinates me. There's many organizations that say, oh no, we have all this approval process, or I can't write that. But as we chatted before this session today, like, you let your team go out and talk to your clients face to face. Let them go and talk at a conference, or you let them pick up the telephone. So why is it? And you let them send emails. So why is it that actually when it comes to a blog, oh no, like, no,
yeah,
that can be a really sensitive thing. But as you've said, Tony, like, you guys have to make sure it's right. But we're humans at the end of the day. We're going to make little mistakes sometimes, aren't we? So how have you overcome that, Tony?
Well, it's I think well, one of the things we did was also, apart from sharing the successes, so when people published a blog and we showed them, look, this is how many views it's had, and we're getting good, and we started getting good feedback as well. And we share that success with them to say, hey, this is great. And then it sort of gives them a bit of, I guess it supercharges them to want to do another blog. But also we made it fun. Like, we had a bunch of really cool, when we first started off, when we were trying to get the wheels turning, because when we first started, you're starting from scratch with not a big pipeline of content. So you've got to move that boulder. So our internal audience was really important for us to start off with, in terms of getting them to write for us, our internal authors. And so we made it fun. We had some like corny awards that we did at the end of each year. We sort of do things like, and we made them like the Oscars. So it was like, the best performance in a blog post about IPv6 or something silly like that. And we'd give out these little trophies, and we made it fun, and people loved it. And it was just things like that just help build the momentum, and it just reinforces that this is actually something that not only is beneficial to the organization, beneficial to me, but it's actually fun. And it's not scary, and and we can get involved. But the good thing it does show by getting, if you're having multiple people in your organization blog, it's not just the same sort of 3 or 4 people. It shows to your community that the real depth of talent that you have within the organization. You can say, wow, look at all these, there's so much going on here. There's so many people, writing these posts. We've had about 50% or so of, I think it's just over 50%, I'd have to check the numbers, of our organization have written a blog at least once. So it helps show the depth of the skills within the team to the community, which is really good. But of course, we can't just rely on our own teams to keep pumping this stuff out. And as I mentioned at the start, one of our other objectives was to really, provide this source, the go-to, I guess, news source for our whole community about what was going on within their community. And APNIC is just one part of that community. The members themselves wanted to hear about what other members were up to, or what other interesting news or research or whatever it may be was going on within their community. So once we got the ball rolling with our internal authors and got a bit of momentum, we then were really pushing hard to get our community involved in writing for the blog as well.
Which I want to come on to in a second, because that's like fantastic. I always say, the best people to talk about your organization are other people. But before we move on to that, can I just ask you one question that's probably
Sure.
on everyone's thought at the moment is, and I often hear this, is people often go, well, what should I write about? I've got nothing useful to say. So from your internal people who, some will be technical, some will be customer service, some will be marketing, etc. How did you encourage them to say they did have something useful to say? How did you educate them on that for them to come up with ideas? And
it was that wasn't hard for us, because we just, as I mentioned before, we do so much good stuff. So our organization covers a pretty big region, and we have one office based in Brisbane, Australia. And so prior to the pandemic, our people did a lot of travel. So we had trainers going out all around our region doing training, showing people how to set up networks and build networks and run them. We had people in our teams going out to various events that would happen in all the various different economies in our region. So we might have some of our customer service staff in Bangladesh one week, and then some of them, over here in Japan, and the next week attending network operator groups or speaking at events. We have all this research coming out of our labs team. And so we actually had a lot going on. So actual content in terms of good stuff to share wasn't a problem. It just wasn't being shared before, because I just didn't know how to do it or where to do it. And so encouraging them to write about what they had seen and done wasn't too hard. Actually, we were sort of pushing on an open door once we got them rolling. But we'd go and sit down with teams and say, look, you've just been to a network operator group meeting in India. What was talked about? What were the main themes? Oh, this was great, or this was great. Great. Can you write a blog post on it for us? Yeah, sure. And that's pretty much how it sort of started off. We had to push a little bit at start once we got going. When we've had the blog rolling now for almost 7 years. Actually, no, it is 7 years today. Not today, sorry, this month. But in those first couple of years, we did have to push. Like our comms team really had to get out there and, say to people, hey, you should write something about this. Now it comes a little bit more naturally, but yeah, it's, I think once we started pointing out to them how that would be interesting, they went, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And they were happy to.
And I think it's, whether obviously your guys got to travel the world, which is amazing, but, even organizations that don't, there's always, like you say, you've got great talent within your organization, however large or small they are. And there's things that you would say to a customer or talk at a conference, but that's content. And it almost sounds like you did an almost sort of internal comms piece to help facilitate that, to almost like probe with questions and
yeah,
actually that's a good bit of content.
Yeah. Well, and it wasn't just the people who traveled as well. So we have, like in some of our, not so much recently, but in the early years, we had some of our development team, our software developers, who wouldn't do a lot of travel at all. In many cases, would write up posts about some of the stuff that they were working on. That some of those things that were being developed, and that they found that useful as well, and our community found that useful because you could see what we're working on in terms of building products. But also for our development team, there was, we've had posts on our blog about specific technologies which aren't really anything to do with networking per se, but are actually development code technologies that have been picked up wider by other people who like reading about that stuff. So there's a little bit of latitude there, but yes, we've had people from all parts of the organization talking about different things that they do and how the organization works, I guess, to give some insight to our members as to what we're up to.
Fabulous. Okay, so now let's move on to the really, really exciting bit. Obviously, that's bit's really exciting, but the really, really exciting bit, which is actually getting your community to blog and be brave enough to actually put that on your website and community. So talk to us a little bit about that, Tony, about how that came about and what the process is.
Yep. So we definitely wanted to grow that as part of our, as I mentioned, there was no single place for this out there. We thought, look, there's no one's offering this to our community. If we start getting our community to talk about what they're up to, surely this is going to be of interest. And it proved to be. To start off with, our industry has lots of grassroots organizations in our region called network operator groups. They're a bit like what do they call them? User groups in software development land and things like that. But basically, they're all grassroots operations, and we have them dotted all around our region. And those meetings are great. There's lots of great stories that you can get out of those meetings. There's lots of presentations that are done by locals, but also they have people from around the region. And one of the things about the internet industry is that even though they're all, our members are in many cases competing with one another, like competing telecommunication providers or competing ISPs. When it comes to the actual technology side of what they do, it's a very sharing community where they'll sort of say, how did you guys implement this? Or what do you think of this technology? And people will share. And it's which is great. And so those operator groups were perfect for us, and we will go to all of them because they're all our members, and it's a chance for us to engage with them. But we found that there was lots of great presentations going on there. So we would say to these people, hey, saw you had a great presentation on X. We've got this new blog. Would you like to write something about that presentation? And they were saying yes. They were happy to do it in most cases. And because I knew what they were talking about, because they just presented on it, and they like to share their story with the rest of the community. And so those events became a really good way for us to generate content. But then we started looking further afield, and things like academics and researchers. So there's a lot of research that goes on into how the internet works and some of the network technologies that we use in our industry. But for example, those academics would maybe present it at a specific measurement conference or an academic conference, and they'd do their paper, then they'd have their paper published, and that'd be it. And they didn't really have any other places to share this. And we thought, well, this is great. Our community would love to hear more about, this. So again, we went to them and said, hey, would you mind writing a blog post on this? And they were like, sure, because they wanted to get their research that they'd just spent all of these years doing out there and publicize. So we looked at places where we thought we could grab good content and that people would be happy to do it. And we approached them, and they all would, 9 times out of 10 would say yes. But other places as well, like other blogs, we would find that there would be some of our community maintain their own personal blogs, and they might write something which was great. And we'd approach them and say, look, do you mind if we repost this on our blog, but we'll give you full credit and we'll drive traffic to you as well? And like, yep, no problem. And so once you start pulling together all of these various strands, you start then building a pipeline, and the momentum just starts to roll. And at first we published probably 2 to 3 times a week, but we quickly built up into publishing 5 days a week, so every weekday, and that's how it stayed now for many years. And we normally do 1 to 2 posts a day, and of those posts on the website, on the blog, about 50 at the moment, it's about 56% guest posts. We try to keep within a 50 to 60% range. And that kind of happens naturally, but that's where we try to keep it. And as the momentum has built, we've then had return bloggers, people who've written for us before, and then say, come back and say, hey, I've got another one on this. Would you take it? And we're like, sure. As we've gotten, I guess, more popular and grown in our community, we have to keep an eye on the quality. of what we're receiving. So we just don't take anything and run it. And obviously there's some topics which we stay away from. So we've become, I guess, a little bit more picky, and we are quite careful in making sure that, you know, the quality of what we're publishing is good, because we've built a reputation now, and so we don't want to throw it away. But it works. And look, our authors are actually generally, you know, the industry is full of very smart people, and generally when they've got something, you know, good to say and they want to write about it, it tends to be good. And so we basically have been doing it this way now for quite some time, and we try and maintain quite a big pipeline to keep the blog rolling, because once you get to that phase of publishing daily, it becomes like, it's a bit like 24-hour news channels. It's a monster that needs to be fed constantly. It's always hungry.
Yeah.
And so our pipeline is big. You know, we may have, you know, anywhere between 30 and 50 leads going at the one time, you know, and have in our pipeline at least sort of 3 weeks of approved, finished content ready to go. Because in, you know, and other pieces in various states of development, and then leads from people who's promised something but haven't given it to us yet, and we're chasing them up. And then there's all the way up to like this, you know, the cold approach type lead. Yeah. We have a big group of those, and we have to keep that moving to make sure we've got content. And of course, stuff just pops up, but maintaining that pipeline is super important to the momentum.
And it's a bit of a beast once you've started it, isn't it? It's almost like you've got to keep pumping in at the top, which people are probably now thinking, well, I'm certainly thinking, like, first of all, how many people do you have in that process? And my second question, with my commercial hat on, whether I'm an association or organization, is what return on investment have you seen? Or like, has it increased your members? So let's answer the first question first.
Okay.
Like, how many people are doing this?
Okay. So in the APNIC communications team who work on the blog, we have 2 dedicated staff who work on it at the moment, who they pretty much their time is basically the blog and our social media, because the two go hand in hand. I haven't really talked about that, but that's their role. We then have and 2 other staff who might do some proofing and stuff on blog posts, or write an occasional blog post. We have half an FTE who writes for the blog, and then others who provide time in terms of checking proofing, probably to about, you know, again, half an FTE. And then there's approvals. People get involved in the approvals and oversight of the whole thing. But if you're saying of people who just specifically work on the blog, there's probably, if I put all the FTE numbers together, probably 3. In total. Now, when we first started out, that wasn't like that, obviously, because we didn't have a blog, and the team was smaller. But what we found was that, and there were some hard decisions to make first up when I first joined, in terms of looking at, well, do we have the skill set to do this? Like, we want to make this shift, but do we actually have the skill set to do it? Because it's not just people who are good writers, but you need to think like a newsroom. You need to have people who have got the, that editorial nose for news. They need to, but also things like Photoshop skills, because we have to have images. And you can imagine what we do doesn't photograph well. It's just sort of, you know, internet numbers. So, you know, being able to do creative graphics and images is a skill, and one that we needed. But also, you know, just being able to do things like manage a pipeline, being able to follow up leads, be good with people. These are all different. There's different types of skills sometimes, of just being someone who just, you know, maybe writes a newsletter. So we did have to scale up, but we did that gradually as the blog grew, and as it's grown. So, I mean, when we first started, the blog was averaging, in its first year, we think we did about 8,000 views a month. Now we're doing 70,000 views a month. Unique views a month. Now, no, it's not the BBC News Online, but for our industry and for what we do for our community, that's actually really good. It's amazing. I mean, to give you a comparison, the old news page on the website did around 1,000 views a month before we started. So now it's doing about 70,000 views a month. So with the blog, and it's as you say, it's something we need to keep moving. So yes, we have a decent sized team. Now, in terms of return, this isn't something, obviously, as a member-based organization and a non-profit, we don't monetize any of this. There's no, I guess, any advertising, none of that. The return to us is more that our community is much more informed on what we do, and it has. We know. I mean, I can go through some of the anecdotal stuff in a moment, but it also helps, I guess, our community learn from each other, and learn from us as well, from our trainers. And like, there's real benefits in terms of cohesion and transparency. So a big thing for us, obviously, in any member-based organization, is transparency. We alongside of our, the opinion-based posts, we also have some less interesting posts. I'd say they're probably the more boring posts. They call them event wraps, and what they are, they're like objective, little short objective write-ups of when we travel somewhere, why we went there, and what we were doing. Yeah. And they're written in a report style. They're a bit boring. They go on the blog though, because it allows our members to see what we're up to, and why we're doing that, and why we're spending, because it's their money, right? We're a member organization, why we're traveling there, what value is it delivering back to the membership. So we have those, as well as, I guess, all of the opinion stuff. So there's a lot of transparency, which is very important for our blog, and for our organization. But anecdotally, like, our blog is quoted regularly now by our community in presentations. I see it, when I go to other RAR conferences or internet industry conferences, I see us being quoted all the time. It gets shared widely throughout our community when there's stories. We do a survey every 2 years about our organization, of our members, to sort of say, a bit of a report card. How are we going, and what are the things we should be focusing on in the next 2 years to serve you better? And in terms of those the report card bit, we have had progressively increasing satisfaction with our organization and what we do. And the blog itself has become, in the last, we've had 3 surveys since it's been created, and has progressively grown in satisfaction amongst our members for what it does. So, but I think one example probably sums it up the best. We published a story last year, and it wasn't one that we wrote. It was actually a community piece, a guest post, and it was actually a guest post that was written by an engineer from VeriSign, and it was published on the VeriSign blog. Now, VeriSign is for those of you who are not aware who VeriSign is, it's quite a large domain name organization, and makes a lot of money, and is quite a well-known corporate in the technology industry. Now, they published it on their blog, this article, and the article was about how Chrome was impacting some root servers. Now, I won't go into the detail of it all, but essentially what it was doing, it was effectively slowing down these root servers, burdening them with all of this extra traffic that was impacting them. And they wrote this post about what Chrome was doing and how that was that impact. And we saw it and said, "This is a great post. Dwayne, do you mind if we run it on our blog as well? We'll give you full credit." And he's like, "Yeah, sure, because we've run your stuff before. No problem." No one noticed it when they published it on their blog. This is this large organization. We put it on ours, and it got picked up, and it went gangbusters. And it caught the attention of the Chromium team who work on Chrome. And they said, "Look, this is causing issues. We're getting some, people are really interested in this. We need to sort it out." And so then they fixed this bug. And 3 months later, we ended up reducing the amount of traffic going to those root servers by a huge percentage. And I don't have it on the top of my head, but it was a massive percentage. And it was all due to that article that was written by Dwayne from VeriSign, that basically caused that to happen. And it was published on our blog. And so we were really happy with that, because there was all these technical things that people were creating and solutions to try and fix the pressure on root servers. But it was, I guess, an instance of the pen being mightier than the sword, where you had an article that did the job that technology solutions couldn't. So it was, I think that sort of helps demonstrate the power of what we've done. And it's been really welcomed by our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with associations, and so whether you're an association or a commercial B2B organization, there's always this sort of well, I don't want to talk about stuff and add value outside of our community, because if not, why are they going to pay to be members, or why are they going to pay for our services? But my view is, and you guys have demonstrated that really, really well, which is why I've invited you on today, is actually, if you give value, if you give all of that information, first of all, they understand what talent you've got within your organization, whether you're an association or a commercial organization. And secondly, there is so much value. Like people then go, well, if I want to join an association or if I want to talk to an organization, I want to talk to that one. So it has so much. And you talked about, people then quoting you in conferences and things, your brand awareness is through the roof. And there's no better marketing than other people talking about you, whether you're a commercial organization or a membership organization. So what you've done is phenomenal, which is obviously why we wanted to talk to you today and actually show that it can work. But it's just thinking outside of the box and not having that. I mean, you haven't mentioned once today, Tony, which I'm really pleased about and didn't expect you to otherwise go like, we're trying to grow members. You haven't mentioned it once. You've always thought about the bigger picture of actually, if we show value, then actually naturally our membership will grow because they'll see value in it. Or even if it doesn't, if we're trying to educate people whether they're members or not, then we've done our job. And that's what associations are about. And I think having talked at a lot of association conferences, particular when social media has seen an increase and the internet's seen an increase, there's been this associations that have said, no, we're just going to do it this way. You have to adapt to the market. And I think the thing I've seen in the last 12 to 14 months is B2B organizations have really struggled with what's happened with COVID. They've traditionally gone to an event, spoke at a conference, or they've networked. And we've been doing lots of projects with B2B organizations where they're like, we're not generating any leads. And I'm like, well, yeah, your website is just a brochure. It's not adding any value whatsoever. You've got huge talent within your organization. You need to put that talent front and center and be creating content that's going to be valuable, because then when people have got a problem, whether it's a Chrome problem or a problem with whatever area it is, it's not about selling, it's about providing an answer or going, then reading content, go, that's me, yeah, I have that problem, and then amazing things can happen. So I think it's a phenomenal job that you guys have done, and well done for
thank you,
doing it and sharing it today. It's really fascinating to listen to.
Thank you. We appreciate that. I agree with you. The pandemic has made things challenging particularly for our community, and where we do a lot of travel, and we've all been sort of marooned in Australia, not being able to get out amongst our community. And I think how we've used our blog, also coupled with how we use our social media to power that, has helped us maintain those connections with our community. And look, we've done a lot of virtual events as well, and all sorts of other things along the way to keep connected. But I agree, it has been a challenging time for us. We can't wait to get back out there amongst all of our friends all around the region. But it's going to be a while yet, I think. And so we have to keep, I guess, making sure that we're connecting with and engaging our community through the online tools that we have as much as we possibly can.
Yeah. So just two things to wrap up on, if that's okay, Tony. First of all, is the approval process, especially from a community point of view. How does that work? Just very quickly, how do people get approved content on?
If we see something we like of theirs and we approach them to write for us and they say yes and it comes in, effectively, it's really, if they're happy with it, we look at it like there's some things that we have some areas that we need to be sensitive of in terms of we have some geopolitical sensitivities in our region, some of the language we use as well, it can be quite different. So we make some where we have to, we'll make light edits to a piece. But once the author is happy with it and we're happy to run with it, then that's it. We publish. For internal stuff that comes to us within the organization, well, actually I guess all content, there's very little of it that I approve. So I'm the communication director at APNIC, and most of the articles don't come to me for approval. Only a smattering of them do, and the reason for that is because we publish so much, and I trust my team. They know we have really good, robust triage processes in place where they know if an article is something that they can sign off, if it needs to be looked at by one of our technical experts, because we're not all technical experts. Like we have, we're communications experts, I guess that's our trade. And while we might work in the technology industry and have, enough knowledge to get through and know about certain things or know where the landmines are, I guess, when we have some of these deep technical articles that we publish, there's no way we're going to know if all of that is correct. So we talk to some of our technology experts within the organization. We run the article by them. They say, yeah, that's good, or I don't agree with this, or whatever it may be. And so we might have a conversation with an author. But overall, we try to keep the approval processes light. Like nothing, we don't do all legal. We don't go through legal to approve things, none of that kind of stuff. It doesn't go to senior executives unless it really has to, unless it's something which we think is, if it comes to me, it generally means it might be sensitive. And then if I think it's fine, then it could be changed and handled, I will. But if even I think it's even more sensitive than that, then I will escalate it. That might happen probably 3-4 times a year. And like we publish 360 articles a year. So it's very rare that kind of thing happens. And I think it's important when you're running a blog or you're doing this kind of thing that you don't get bogged down in your approvals processes. Otherwise, it can just suffocate the whole thing. Over approving is bad. and if you've got the right processes in place, then it shouldn't be a problem.
And with that, before we move on to the promotion part and social media, obviously you're across APACs. Obviously there's different languages. Is it all published in English, or do you accept it in different languages? How does that work?
It is English. We've tussled with this idea so many times about translation. There's a lot of challenges that go with it because we cover 56 economies. The number of languages in our region is immense, and so choosing which languages to publish in is one tricky decision to make, because you're not going to, someone's going to be unhappy. We can't do them all. We don't have infinite resources. We're a non-for-profit, so we can't do everything in every language, and we don't have staff internally. We have a lot of very multicultural staff, and we have a lot of languages on hand, but we don't have all of them, and so that are present in our region. So it makes things hard, and so we have standardized on English, and we've stuck to that. And what we've found as well is that in our industry, most of we have a technical audience, and they're quite well educated. And so what you'll find is that many of them will be proficient enough in English, or very proficient in English, even though it may not be their first language. And so we've gotten by on English. But look, it's always something we're looking at. I think we have this debate every year and how we would do it and how we'd roll it out. And it's hard. It's hard because we don't want to choose a certain number of languages and then leave others out, and then make some of our community feel like they're sort of unloved, I guess. It is very hard. But yes, so we stuck with English.
Yeah, and from what you've said, it sort of makes a logical decision in why that is. So that's useful. But I thought people are probably thinking that, so I want to ask the question. And we do a lot of international stuff, so
it's easy for some of the other the internet registries. So for example, APNIC, they publish everything in Africa. They do their stuff in English and French, because that pretty much covers a lot. I mean, obviously there's lots of local dialects, but that covers a lot. In Latin America, at APNIC, they do their publishing in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and that covers the region. So it's only the European registry and the Asia Pacific registry, which is us, that have the huge spread of languages to deal with. Because I've worked in London for many years before in Australia, but as you would have known, everyone thinks Europe, it's just a place, right? Everyone, when it's not, it's like there's so many different economies and languages, and it's the same for Asia Pacific. People view a region as a region, but it's incredibly diverse.
Yeah, absolutely, and different cultures and different understanding. So
absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so with your 360 blogs, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. How do you promote that without falling into the trap of just like pushing everyone out on social media? How does your then promotion engine work in that, Tony?
So we have the way we integrate social media with the blog, we call it like the conversation hub. So the blog is at the heart of it, and I guess some social media we use as content repositories, and some as communication tools. So things like YouTube or SoundCloud, Flickr, whatever it may be, like, so for photos, videos, we use that as, I guess, to put content, to host content that we then embed in our blog, but can also be shared very widely and have people subscribe to. But the real promotion engines on social media for us are Twitter and Facebook. And we also we also use LinkedIn as well. It hasn't been, LinkedIn is good for us. It's not as strong, although it's something which we're looking at to grow more. And also Weibo, which is the Chinese version of Twitter. We use that as well. And because we find in our regions, people use different things. So for example, and we've gotten very good at understanding times of day for when we need to promote stuff because of all the different people in the region, who our followers are on the various platforms. So if we send something, for example, if we want to promote something in Bangladesh, we know that we have a massive following on Facebook from people in Bangladesh, and that we would, and for our day in Australia, it would be end of day, which is their morning, so we can catch them. That's when you'd post a story that mentioned that. If it was for Japan, we know Japan actually have quite a strong Twitter following in Japan, so Twitter is a good one for us. They're on a very similar time zone. We know when we can publish with them, and our blog is actually is read globally. So it's not just our region, and we've learned this, and so we have a fairly strong sort of understanding of times of day when we push things out on Twitter or Facebook as our promotion engines. I guess we have it on our blog is fully integrated with the homepage of our website. And we also do things with some of our old school mailing lists, which we still maintain. The internet industry loves mailing lists. We still have those. But the social media does the job a lot of the time. We don't promote like all of the things like the event wraps and the transparency stuff. That's there for transparency's sake, not as a platform. But we do use our social media as one of our big engines to promote what we have. And it works because we have that content, and we call it the conversation hub because we find that people will jump from different things. So they might see a tweet about a blog post and they'll come to the blog, and then while they're reading that post, there might be a slide share embedded in it. So they'll look at the slide share, and then they might go over to our slide share and look at some other presentations that are on there. And so we're sort of keeping them in the hub as much as we possibly can. And that's sort of how we've made it work. And it's much more tightly integrated, and we have a pretty good idea of how it all works. But there's also the aggregators like the Reddits and things like that as well, which we are aware of. We don't do any astroturfing on those of always pushing our stuff, but something like Hacker News, for example, which is a big thing for us. We know if we of certain contributors to Hacker News who might put our stuff on there regularly, and we've sort of just by using sort of free tools and looking around and finding who we think these influencers are, we can publish at times when we think the influencer, on platforms where we believe the influencer is going to see it, and then hopefully if they like it, we'll submit it to one of those platforms, and it will drive traffic for us. So yeah, look, it's an evolving thing, but we put a lot of thought in it to make sure that we're always getting our stories in front of the people who need to read it.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head with a few things there, obviously. The one thing is, and again, we see this quite a lot within organizations, is they have a bit of content and they schedule it for 10 o'clock on a Monday and they post it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, post it across all of them at the same time, because that's when they're in the office. And we always say to people, social media is 24/7, and you shouldn't post the same content across same channels, because like you've indicated with India, if you were posting stuff in the UK and you wanted to go to the business community, you probably wouldn't post it on Facebook. You'd probably post it on LinkedIn at a certain time of the week. Where if you want to engage in India, then absolutely, I think the largest platform for business and consumer in India is Facebook, isn't it? So if you want to engage with a certain community, you have to post it on Facebook. So I think
that's right.
And people can often go, well, I haven't got time to do it. I haven't got time to do that. And I almost say, well, don't do it then. Because just blast across all of them, you're only going to hit a tiny percentage. But if actually you post less, but most relevant to that audience on Facebook or Twitter, etc., at the right time, then it's going to be much more valuable, isn't it? So it isn't about just posting for posting's sake. It's thinking about what you want the outcome to be. So who do you want to talk to? What's the best channel? What do you want the outcome to be? So you've got life really well, Tony. And I think also taking them on the journey. So like you've said, taking them from maybe Twitter to your website or your blog, and then they see a slide share, and then they might subscribe to your slide share as well. So it's always thinking about the bigger picture, and not just taking them back to your blog. Oh, I want to join, or I want to attend this. It's again just being that facilitator, isn't it? That facilitator one-stop shop of all things to do with the services that you offer or the community that you're in. And like you said, globally, like, you know, theoretically you're across APAC, but you will know that people probably from the UK and Europe are probably visiting your website, but so what? Because they might be
Absolutely.
looking at something
Yeah.
across APAC, mightn't they?
Yeah, and look, we actually know that the US is now our biggest actual reader. Our region is of the economies in our region is still by far the largest component of our readership. But once you start hitting those aggregators that take it far and wide, and as an English language blog, we have then like people from the UK, from Canada, the US in particular, you know, globally, everyone can look at this. And because there is no global source for this news, and it's become that successful, it has become the place where we have people come and have a look. And look, we work closely, and our sister regional internet registries have done similar things. I've got blogs now, and they're actually growing as well, which is good. And we're working with them to help and share content. But yeah, once you start hitting some of those big aggregators, you do start pulling in audiences from other parts of the world, which then also impacts on our strategy as well. We think, well, some of these stories might be of interest to those markets, so we know, and we have a pretty good idea of when to post in those regions to hit them as well. So yeah, the internet is a global thing, and you can't, as you say, you can't just go sort of 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. That's it. That's the day. It's
Yeah.
it's always different.
And also, I like the fact you call it conversation hub, because again, like social media is not, you can, it can post stuff out, but actually it's two-way conversation. So
Totally.
I like the fact that you call it a conversation hub, because it facilitates a conversation, which is exactly why it was set up in the first place. It wasn't set up to sell, but inadvertently, if you do a great job, then it can sell or drive members and stuff.
Yeah.
What's next for APNIC then? What's next on your radar in terms of content marketing development? I'm excited to know now. Like, what's next?
Yeah, well, we're currently sort of kicking the idea of a podcast around. It was something that we have looked at a few times and haven't done, but we think that now that we've got this, I guess, we've built this this blog with a lot of readers, a lot of authors, guest posters to it, that these are people who would be happy to talk about some of this stuff as well. So we are considering a podcast, but we're looking at it not at the moment. We're sort of covering everything to do with our industry. We're thinking we might narrow it down to a specific part of the industry, rather than trying to be all things to all people. But that's an idea we're kicking around. We haven't decided yet, but that's something we're looking at. But yeah, like I think, I guess we are also looking at how we have tighter integration with our events, because we do a lot of online. We normally have physical conferences. Now they're all online events, and we find a lot of the people who write for us also present at our conferences, and so there's been some tighter building of programs because of that. So look, I think we want the blog to remain successful. So continuing to grow, but at the same time keeping the quality high is really probably the main focus. We haven't deviated from that. But yeah, we are thinking of other ways we can share. And if we end up doing the podcast, then that will be a whole new adventure for us diving into, as you're probably obviously well aware of.
Well, yeah, as we're here today, we're on a podcast on YouTube, and we started our podcast last January, and it's across like 40 countries, and you can't, it's the internet, you can't control where listeners come from, and you can't dictate what's going to be popular and what isn't. But obviously we look at the stats and go, wow, that's interesting, people really like this, let's do more of it. And inadvertently, we're very big believers of the type of things that you're doing. So we do a lot of content. We do a lot of free webinars, a lot of YouTube live streams, a lot of podcasts, a lot of webinars for other people, a lot of conferences, and it drives a huge amount of awareness, and it's all about providing value. But we get so many recommendations, so many companies recommending us to people, and it does fuel the economy inadvertently for us. So podcast has been really successful. Right. And it's interesting how from our perspective, how we'll get an inquiry for something and I'll say, oh, where did you hear about us? Well, I heard you talk at a conference, thought that was really good, so I listened to your podcast, and I've been finding that content really useful. And actually they know me better than I know them, because they've been listening to me for the last 3 or 4 months, which is a bit odd, but has worked really well for us and a lot of our clients that we help. So yes, but one piece of content or one tool I can highly recommend if you guys don't use it already is SparkToro. Have you heard of SparkToro?
No, I haven't.
If you it's set up by Rand Fishkin, who is an amazing guy. Actually, we did a YouTube video on him a couple of months ago. But SparkToro, if you can just put in your web address, so you could put APNIC's web address into SparkToro, and it will tell you out of your audience how many people are listening to podcasts and what podcasts they're listening to.
Okay.
Or you could put their job titles in, and it will tell you the same. So it can help answer the question without having to ask people, do you listen to a podcast? Yes or no, and what channels they get their content from. So.
I'll look it up. I'll look it up for sure.
Excellent. So thank you so much for your time today, Tony. It's
That's
been
all right.
fascinating, and we always love bringing these theories to life with great examples. So thank you for your time. But if people do want to know more, if they want to find out a little bit about APNIC, they might not necessarily want to understand the subject, but go and have a look at what you guys are doing. Where's the best place to go and have a look?
So go to the blog first. So blog.apnic.net will get you there, and from there you can traverse all of our wonderful websites and properties. We have training, free online training. If you are a techie listening to this and you are interested in learning more about network, building a network security, all that kind of thing. There's all that kind of thing. Wonderful stuff is there. Plenty of content. It is mostly technical, so if you are technically minded, you will find it interesting. But there's occasional content that's more looking at the industry as a whole and the internet as a whole and the future of the internet. So there's some stuff there for the non-techies as well. But blog.apnic.net is the place to start.
Fabulous. Thank you, Tony. It's been really
No
great
problem.
to talk to you today. Thank you.